Hello. Hello, world. I am Norman Rafferty. I work for Sanguine Games. I'm here to present our ever popular panel, DIY Self-Publishing for Beginners. So, yeah. So normally I have a co-moderator who might help us out with some of the stuff in the stream, but I'm going to go ahead and fly solo today and try to go ahead and moderate all of this myself. Now, if you're curious about some of this, I'm going to try and help you out with some of the links by dropping them in the chat. But there's a worse version of this presentation in Google Slides. So, you can go ahead and download that a bit later. We're going to go pretty quickly here because we're pressed for time. Normally, this is a presentation on how to self-publish. This includes anything. A lot of you, I think, want to go ahead and make like books, but we also here at Sanguine Games, we make games, as well as comic books, video games, board games, that sort of thing. I'm going to go ahead and talk you through some of the issues here and how to go ahead and get it set up by yourself and a self-starter. Okay, so once again, there's going to be links, and of course there'll be a video recorded, and I've already dropped a link to a big part of the presentation. Now, my advice about whenever you have to do anything by yourself is go ahead and be smart about it. There's a cute little acronym, but it's going to help you whenever we have to do any task involved, working with ourselves, to go ahead and break it down. By the way, if you have any questions, I am watching the chat. So if you can go ahead and ask a question in the chat, feel free to interrupt me anytime. There will be a slight delay in the transmission. I'll try to get to these as soon as I can. This is for your benefit. So basically what we're saying is when you do anything, you should make sure that you know what you're going to do. Make sure it's very specific. You need to make sure it's measurable. How big is this? How do we know when we're done? Is this something you can do? Can you act on it? Is it actionable? Are we going to go ahead and treat everybody right and make sure we're responsible, both to other people and to our own well-being? And the most important thing, it's not late until it's past the deadline. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that everything is timetable. This is everything you need to know if you want to go ahead and set up your own small business, especially if you want to do that ever important crowdfunding thing. Because obviously when you crowdfund something, you're going to have to know how much you're going to make so it's measurable, and people are going to expect it to come out after a certain time, so it's got to be timetable. Yeah, the captions, I left a little extra room for the voice captions, so hopefully my weird Midwestern accent isn't confusing him too much. Okay, good. Two-part presentation, that says EST, but we're PST, so ignore that. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is, this will be pretty short. We have to decide what we're going to do. I imagine everyone's here because you want to publish something, right? You want to publish maybe your own book, your own novel. Do we have any comic book people here who want to do their own graphic novel? Anyone? I realize we have to wait a little bit before that comes up. Okay, well, whatever you're going to want to make, I'm going to assume that we spent a lot of time talking about intellectual property here, which is if you want to license. Oh, did we lose the audio? I don't know if that's on my end. Oh, you can still hear it? Okay, Tanfer lost the audio. All right, sorry, Tanfer. Okay. Securing your intellectual property is going to be an issue here. I assume that most of you, because you're here for the Furry Writers Guild, that you want to go ahead and make something yourself and create it from scratch. There might be some options to, if you want to go ahead and license something else or update something else for someone else. We'll talk about updating here in a little bit. Hopefully we've got some Maggie Hogarth fans here. Anybody here fans, Space Marines, that sort of thing? Okay, I'm going to assume that since most of you are for the Writers Guild, most of you would want to go ahead and create something. And often when we talk about publishing something yourself, we have to decide if you're going to do something that's really, really, really fancy, that's going to be pretty expensive per product. We call that a premium. Or if you want to go ahead and do something, I know, Janara, hey. If you want to do something that's going to be not as expensive to produce, but on the other hand, you can sell it for cheaper. Most of you probably made the decision to be a fiction writer. Congratulations. Fiction writing is pretty much in the economy department. You can go ahead and write a bunch of words, and It's not as expensive as hiring artists or getting game components. Excuse me, or that sort of thing. So, and printing your own book is an excellent introduction to all of this. As a, making your own novel, you're also going to have to decide what specific form is it going to take. These days, a lot of people are using electronic distribution. There's Amazon Prime. There were some very good panels earlier discussing the differences of Kindle Unlimited and publishing electronically. That is very much your best bet if you're a fiction writer these days. It's easy for people to download. They can be impulse buys, or if you're on Amazon Prime, they're going to be renting those sorts of things. One thing that folks like Maggie Hogarth and we here at Sanguine Games like to do is we like to go ahead and make something electronic first, and then after judging the electronic interest, then go back and try to do a mass printing or a print-on-demand version. Print-on-demand is when you print the books when people order them. So instead of having a warehouse that's holding 10,000 of them, you go ahead and when 5 people order it, you go to a place like Lulu or Lightning Press and print off a couple copies. Print on demand is a lot better for small press people because, once again, the copies go out as soon as people request them. Whereas mass printing, you have to have a warehouse and you have to hold on to these things. Mass printing is for if you've been really successful. I'm going to drop some links later on to Maggie Hogarth's discussion, where Maggie often publishes several short stories and then later does a crowdfunding to justify doing a mass printing to print a lot of different books. Now, you're probably an author that no one's heard of, especially if you're self-publishing. So one thing you have to ask yourself is how many copies of something that you can actually sell. I mean, I believe in you. You're all authors. I think you're all good at stuff. And one nice thing about crowdfunding is it lets us look at something called the Pareto principle. Some of you have probably worked in retail before and may have heard of this before, where 80% of your business is coming from about 20% of your repeat customers, those people who come back over and over again. If we apply that to something like a Kickstarter, like an Indiegogo or something like that, we can basically assume that for every one person that crowdfund, for every 20 people that crowdfunded you, another 80 people might actually buy it once it's a physical product. This is what people used to mean when they said they would do a crowdfunding and where they kind of lowball it. Like they're expecting that if we get 1,000 people to show up in the crowdfunding, maybe if we stump this at conventions or sell this later, maybe over the next 2 or 3 years, we could go ahead and sell 3,000, 4,000 more. Most of you, I believe, are fiction artists, or fiction authors. So I'm guessing that a lot of you are in this for the long haul. You want to publish a book that's a passion project for you, and you want to sell it to other people. So one advantage that we have when we use a crowdfunding type of operation is that you can assume that for every person who prepaid for it, 3 or 4 more people will buy it down the road. That's going to come up a little bit later. Okay, now also, whenever you have to make anything, whether it's a video game or a box game or something, you're going to have fixed costs and per unit costs. The fixed cost is how much you paid to make it in the first place. Like, for example, you're an author. If you want to go ahead and write 60,000 words for something and you have a pay rate of like 5 cents a word, that's a fixed cost. As soon as we pay you and get the book done, you get paid once. It doesn't matter if we sell 1 copy or sell 10,000 copies. You got paid once. We're done. Per unit costs are how much it costs to actually produce the thing. If it's physical, that means we have to actually print the books and sell them to people. But per unit cost also includes things like distribution. If you sell over Amazon, Amazon's going to take 10%, 25%, sometimes even 50% of your entire product. So, the more, even though you might be selling more, if other people are taking bigger pieces of that. That's a much bigger deal when we talk about physical product. When you make that later, it's not so much if you're using for digital distribution. And once again, if you have any questions while we're going through this, just let me know. I'm going a little fast because we have a big presentation, but there's some of this we're going to skip. I want to make sure we don't run over because I know we're going to have closing ceremonies after this. So when you're planning a crowdfunding goal, if you want to crowdfund something like crowdfund your mass printing here, we're going to be concerned about both the flat fixed cost that you paid to get your materials up front, paying the author, paying a cover artist, that sort of thing. And then when we say we need like 1,000 people or 2,000 people to crowdfund it, if 1,000 people are crowdfunding it, that's 1,000 units we're going to make out there. So if it's going to cost us $5 or $6 or $10 to print each one of these books or each one of these games, we have to put that in there too. So kind of the short answer is, if you had to like hire an artist for $1,000 and it costs you $1 to print each book and you're going to print 1,000 books, your budget is going to be at least $2,000. And it's actually going to be more than that, because we're going to talk about the pieces people are going to take. But now, if you want to go ahead and set up your own crowdfunding, we've got a ballpark figure that we can go ahead and start with. And all right, so let's go ahead and, we're specific and measurable. As I always warn people, when you're setting up your budget, we're going to repeat this. Always ask for more money than you're going to need, because stuff is going to go wrong. It's 2020. I don't need to tell you that stuff goes wrong. So you're going to have hidden fees that you didn't think of. You're going to have postage rates that go up. Sometimes people don't even plan for the postage. There's ways around planning for postage, but there's going to be like all sorts of little nickel and dime fees. So don't believe any hype people tell you where it says you have to lowball your crowdfunding. No. Ask for all the money you need, especially if this is your first crowdfunding, because this is how to crowdfund and you've never done one before. Ask for more money, slightly more money. Don't be greedy, but slightly more money than you think you're going to need, because stuff is going to go wrong. And we're going to talk about that more when we get to responsible stuff. Also, this is a little weird, but I always recommend that you put a maximum on your rewards. Like if you're going to sell something, you can pick an absurd number if you're crowdfunding. You can pick a number like 10,000 units or 5,000 units. But if you have like physical stuff you're going to send to people, like autographing, one of my favorite stories to tell is about Rich Burlew, who you may know was Giants in the Playground, the Order of the Stick guy. He did a crowdfunding where he said, hey, I'm going to print my book of cartoons and I'm going to autograph them. And he didn't put a maximum on his autographing. As near as I can tell, he was still autographing them 4 years later, because he had thousands of people show up. So if you're doing anything physical, this is when, like I said, measurable and responsible, make sure you put a cap on that, like a number. Also, this isn't really relevant to fiction authors, but don't feel like you have to do gimmicky rewards. Like I know there was, I wasn't a crowdfunding, but I know Lemony Snicket for Unfortunate Events auctioned off cute little characters in the book. Yeah, Janora knows what I'm talking about. Yes, the good news is the Kickstarter broke records. The bad news is he didn't put a cap on some of the rewards. So, just pick a number. But also, don't feel like you have to do crazy rewards like that, like autograph, that kind of stuff. Especially if this is your first crowdfunding, just make the book. That's what you want to do. Just make the game and don't worry about being a lot of fancy stuff. It makes more work and can cause more headaches. Now, one of the most important things here is this has to be something that you can do. If this is going to be a fiction project, you're going to write 50,000 words, we've already had some very good panels on writing technique, and also there's a lot of software that's available. It's pretty easy to go ahead and get something done. In general terms, it means there's stuff that you have to do yourself, and then there's stuff you hire other people to do, which we call freelancing. Some people were using the stock cover art that was provided with some of the online features. If you want to go ahead and have a fancy cover, that's going to cost you money. You will have to pay freelancers up front. It's 2020 and many of you are furries. You all know that people don't get paid in exposure. You're going to have to pay freelancers up front for artwork. And the nicer the artwork is, the more money it's going to cost. So, either you can pay this out of pocket or you can try to do a crowdfunding to sort of get this stuff. The good news is, before crowdfunding, you had to make a lot of guesswork. Like back when we wanted to print our first fiction novel, because we printed, for Iron Claw, we printed the fiction novel Scars. We didn't know how many people were going to buy this book, especially over a certain time period. The nice part is about, with crowdfunding, if you go ahead and crowdfund a product, you know about how many people would pre-order it, and then you can have some idea of how much it would sell. Like if we sold 1,000 pre-orders, we might be able to sell 3,000 or 4,000 more. If we sold 10,000 pre-orders, we might be able to sell 30,000 or 40,000 more. Some things about that. If most of you are printing your own books, for comic books and box games, you might have to do a larger production. For most of your book stuff, you can pretty much be set up pretty quickly. Once again, if you know your project is a comic book project or you need fancy cover art, ask for all the money up front. If you don't feel bad, I need to emphasize this. Don't feel bad if you do a crowdfunding and you don't hit your target. That's actually good news. That means that if you try to do a crowdfunding and didn't hit the target, you did not waste a lot of money on something that was not going to sell, because that's a bigger heartbreaker when you put a bunch of money up, made something, and it didn't sell, and you watched it like just take up space, or that people didn't want it. Better to do a crowdfunding and have that fall apart. Oh, no, sorry, crowdfunding and have it not meet its goal, than to have everything fall apart. Crowdfunding is your friend. Okay, that's why I also talked about the long tail of a product. We'll talk about that a bit more. How long are you planning on being in on this? Remember that if you write a novel, novels are going to have to spread by word of mouth. You're probably only going to do about your early 20% sales, and then for the next 2, 3, maybe 5 years, you're going to have to go ahead and get more people interested in it. Developing word of mouth. No one's heard of you. This is this is our first self-publishing project. So you're going to have to go ahead and commit to this. Are you ready to commit to 2 or 3 years or whatever of being nice to strangers on the internet? We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to wrapping this up. But it does mean that you're going to have to commit to this. When you're self-publishing, you're both you're not just the creator, you're also the marketer. We live in the future in 2020 when a lot of people have social media stuff and a lot of people are expected to be marketing themselves all the time. So, I mean, I think you can do it, but we're going to talk a little bit later. You should probably set up a separate social media. Like, I know you've probably got your good social media and maybe you have some followers, so that's good. But I always recommend setting up a separate social media for business stuff, for reasons we'll get into a little bit later. Okay, we already talked about Pareto and crowdfunding. Like we said, you can, if you sold one pre-order, you could probably sell 4 more. This is more for gaming, where if you want to sell more hardcore stuff. So we'll skip past that. We'll already get to part 2. So we're making some pretty good time here. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me to ask. But I want to talk a little bit more about making sure that we're responsible when we're doing our development here. Because I know crowdfunding got a bit of a terrible rap, especially because of this guy. Oh my God, this one. Let me link your article here. Okay, what does this say here? This is a news article where a man named Peter Molyneux did crowdfunding, and he said if you ask for too much money up front because of the rules of Kickstarter, it's very hard to ask for the complete development budget. This is what's known as a lie. Okay, this is 100% not true. If you crowdfund something through Kickstarter or Indiegogo or through anything, all of those crowdfunding say you are responsible to deliver and you're supposed to ask for all the money up front. This is not true. This guy basically threw his entire company under the bus. He should have asked for all the money up front. By the way, he even got all of his money up front. So don't believe that. I also want to do a quick warning here about something you see on some crowdfunding services called flexible funding. Okay, a place like Kickstarter does just regular funding, all or nothing. If you ask for $10,000 and you only get $9,000, your project is canceled. Some places like Indiegogo do something called flexible funding, where they say you can ask for $10,000, but if you only get $5,000 for your crowdfunding, they'll declare it won and give you money. Okay? Don't do that. First of all, if you need $5,000, you ask for $5,000. If you can do it in $1,000 because you've already written the novel and you just want to go ahead and get the cover artist, ask for a low number, and then you can do something called stretch goals to ask for more money. Don't. And secondly, Indiegogo takes a bigger cut of the crowdfunding money if you do it with flexible funding. So, in other words, you're not getting $5,000, you're getting like $3,000. So if you needed $10,000, you did flexible funding at $5,000, and then Indiegogo took their cut and only gave you $3,000. How are you going to do this? If your budget was originally bigger than that, you're not going to succeed. And you're going to be on the hook for this because, no, don't do it. Ask for the money you need. It's not, their money. It's, it's your money. Don't, once again, winning a crowdfunding is not the end goal. Making your stuff and getting it out there is the end goal. So don't do that. I'm going to go ahead and share our private shame here. We did a crowdfunding that didn't meet its goal. Hooray! I didn't print a whole bunch of a comic book that wasn't going to sell. And also, we came back and did it again later. Sometimes people think, well, should I cancel my crowdfunding early if I didn't make all the money? You can do that if you want to. No one cares. Like, I've never heard anyone say, oh, these guys didn't meet their last crowdfunding, so we're not going to go ahead and back the next one. That's just sour grapes. It doesn't really happen. Once again, I can't emphasize enough, your crowdfunding goal needs to cover all of your costs and then some. You're going to be working on this by yourself, and that can take a lot of your morale. You want to make sure that you're actually going to come out positive on this. So don't forget to be responsible to yourself. Once again, no one's heard of you, so you need to make sure that your sales predictions are realistic. One nice thing, as I mentioned, about a crowdfunding is that it can go ahead and tell you how many units you're actually going to sell. This is one of the things I always point out here where, don't feel bad that you've never managed before. Here's some billion-dollar guys saying, oh, yeah, Tomb Raider is going to sell 3.4. Tomb Raider is the best-selling video game of 2016. Broke all records, even outsold all previous Tomb Raiders. Oh, no, we thought we were going to sell 5 million. Okay, no. See, if these guys are making mistakes like that, what I'd rather be a little more close to home. Here's what I'd like to use as an example of a heartbreaker here. All right, this is a cute little video game that I recommend to people called When the Water Tastes Like Wine. It's a cute little narrative game, and it's adorable. It's made by some of the Firewatch people, but it's what we call a heartbreaker because according to this article, they didn't make back all of their money. And I'm going to talk about some problems that the article has. First of all, it's a cute little video game. Sting is a voice actor in it. Sting, big Grammy-winning musician, sold platinum level albums. He's in the game. You wouldn't know that because Sting didn't promote it in his own social media. No one seems to know he's in the game. He must have been a really expensive get for this game. This is what I meant by saying being responsible and actionable. He costs a lot of money, and as we see from the budget here. Okay, now some of this is guesswork here. Based on some evidence I could find, they don't list how many units that they sold of When the Water Tastes Like Wine. I'm assuming 4,000 units because at the time, that was what I was able to estimate that they sold on Steam as full price. This is back when you could get this kind of data. Okay, so if they were just talking about their Steam sales at $19.95 minus the fixed cost for distribution, the article says they had a $140,000 budget. So as near as I can tell from the math in this article, if they had a $140,000 budget but only sold 4,000 units, that's how they lost money. Okay, and to be honest, some of the issues I have with this is, first of all, they spent a lot more on this project than I think they needed to. Who knows how much of that was voice acting and that sort of thing. And secondly, in the article, they say they had to make back all their money in the first 6 weeks. Okay, there's a thing going around that video game people will tell you this, but also I've heard book people tell you this, that, oh man, if you don't sell in the first 6 weeks, you'll disappear out of sight and no one's ever heard of you. Okay, that's not true. You're an indie. This is your first time you've ever published anything. No one's heard of you. I love you. I believe in your books, and I think you can actually get somewhere, but no one's heard of you. You're going to have to hype this for another 2 or 3 or 4 years, and we need to plan for that long issue. The good news is you live in the future with print on demand and digital distribution, and they haven't killed net neutrality yet. This means anyone who wants to can order your book and buy it. I got gray hairs here. I started in the 90s. There used to be a time period where people couldn't get your stuff. So once you list this on Amazon or for digital sale or on drive through fiction, once it's up there, anyone who wants it can order it at any time. Yeah, someone just asked. Among Us is really popular. Among Us is pretty mimetic, and they're exploding. Don't think you're going to be Among Us. Like, I believe in you, but also Among Us not only is exploding, but that's by a veteran dev team. This isn't their first rodeo. I'm going to use a better example here that you may have heard of called The Pirate's Fate. Okay, this was a first effort by a small production team, and they kickstarted their project. So let me go ahead and send you a link to that. They went ahead and kickstarted their project, so I know their budget. And once again, this was back in 2018 when I could get some sales information on it. So as near as I can tell, notice that these guys are way lower stakes. They didn't have a $140,000 budget. They had a $15,000 budget, but they kept their costs controlled. By lowering the cost, knowing their market, being responsible about their production, and then planning for a long lifetime of 2 or 3 years. I mean, this is still like the first 6 weeks of the product or so, but notice that they made more money than when the water tastes like wine. So they're in the positive. So I would use The Pirate's Fate as an example of something that's closer. It's more modest. It doesn't have fancy voice acting. It doesn't have all the gimmicks they had, but it made the people who wanted it happier. They kept the cost controlled. They stayed responsible, and they're already making new games. So your goal is, keep it small, keep it manageable, and keep it responsible. So yeah, more power to these guys. Okay, which does bring us to another thing. How much money are you going to charge for your stuff? And the short answer is, I always say, more than you think you're going to charge. A lot of you might say, hey, no one's ever heard of me, so maybe I should lowball the price of my book or whatever. And the answer is, we're going back to Pareto principle. Whatever you're writing, the people who love it are going to want to pay a lot of money. And lowering your book price from like $20 to $15 is not going to sway some casual person. If they were already like want to be a fan of yours, either it has to be like dirt cheap, like $5 or free. A lot of this advice is different for fiction publishers, because if you're publishing on Amazon, if you're on Amazon Prime, I believe Amazon Prime is exclusive right now. It keeps going back and forth, but people subscribe to that. They pay a flat fee per month to read books. So they're paying a flat fee, and people who are Prime subscribers, their goal is to read as much as possible, because they pay a flat fee no matter how much they read. And so that opens up a market for you, because, it's kind of free, there. And then open the market for cool microfiction short stories. There were some panels that discussed this better than I did. But once you actually make a physical product, like a physical graphic novel or a game or something, don't kill yourself by lowering the price a little bit thinking it's going to get you more sales. It's not. And if you make the margins too thin, if you make it too cheap, you're going to start losing money. Or if you're only making pennies per copy, it's going to kill you to have to stump this for 2, 3, or 4 years. Because once again, I'm going to repeat, you're going to have to be selling this for 2 to 3 to 5 years. No one's heard of you, and you're not going to make that big 6-week splash and then get out. Okay, and also, once again, when we're doing our budget here, charge more money and sell fewer copies. No one's heard of you. You're going to get that Pareto 20%, the people who are highly motivated to buy your stuff. Excuse me. I don't know how that got in there. Once we've gone ahead and figured out how much to charge for the product and how much we're going to sell it for, okay, we can now get our budget. Because remember, our budget was the fixed cost plus the per unit cost would tell us what our crowdfunding goal was. Now we have to figure out how much to charge for each one of those. And that's hugely complicated. So to help you out, I've gone ahead and with future stuff here, I've gone ahead and gotten a spreadsheet set up in Google Sheets here that can go ahead and help you with it. It's annotated, so it's got little triangles in the corner to go ahead and help you get this set up. I like what Rhiannon here says, where Charging a lot makes you feel premium. So yeah, in fact, lowballing your price can make people think cheap is often both means inexpensive and low quality. Charging less actually makes people feel less. The people who are motivated to buy it. Now, that said, I talked about premium versus economy. If you're going to charge more money, you're going to either have to make it something that specialty people want, or you're going to have to make it look nicer. I believe most of you are fiction writers, so most of you will probably want to spend a few bucks and get some nice cover art for your book, which you can do. There's lots of furry artists out there who will be happy to do something for you. But yeah, it's Renan's totally correct on this. Okay, so that spreadsheet has some notes in it how to plug some values in here. So let's go ahead and deal with the thing no one likes to deal with, deadlines. Okay, one of the things I like about NaNoWriMo, because hopefully some of you are participating in NaNoWriMo, is NaNoWriMo goes back to what we talked about, SMART. It's specific. We're going to write 50,000 words. Measurable. We'll know when we're done because we have 50,000. It's actionable. If you worked a little bit, if you do like just 1,000, 2,000 words every day in 30 days, you could get the book done. It's responsible because you're not killing yourself to do it. And most importantly, it's timetabled. You start on November 1st and end. Even if you don't, and some of you I know did some NaNoWriMo projects where you started it in November, but you didn't finish it until April. That's fine. The important thing is that we have some sort of structure. If you're going to do a crowdfunding, you have to put in the crowdfunding when you expect the deliverables to show up. Okay? Don't feel bad if you don't meet all of your deliverable dates. Here are 3 of my favorite Kickstarter examples to use that, like Undertale. Look at Undertale. Pfft, they were a year late. Oh, jokes. Did anything happen to Undertale? Was that a big deal? I do know, speaking of when I said 2 to 3 to 5 years, Fighting Herds recently came back into the conversation because their fighting and especially their netcode made them an esport. So Fighting Herds did not make all of their money in their first 6 weeks. Fighting Herds is here for the long haul. So once again, make something that people are going to like, and it's okay if you miss your deadline. Okay, now one thing I talked about here is long tail production or long haul. Long tails have been running this for a long time. Okay, one of our goals here to see if the product's being realistic is if we do a crowdfunding, like I said, the crowdfunding might be, we're going to look at the Pareto 20% who would go ahead and sell that. And then over the next, after we move that to the crowdfunding people, we expect to sell another 20% over the next 60 days, another 20% over the next 90 days, and then over the next year, and then over the next year after that. 2 or 3 years where your sales will slowly go downhill. That's okay. The product gets old. Maybe you'll catch on and go viral. Maybe everyone's going to like it. But more realistically, if you sold 1,000 copies in your crowdfunding, you will probably sell another 4,000 copies over the next 2 or 3 years, and then it might little peter out. Now, you're not selling box games or video games. You're authors, so you're largely resistant to a lot of the crazes and that sort of gimmicky type stuff. So your perennial type stuff will often, if you write stuff earlier in your books, especially if you're writing a series, as you write more books, your earlier stuff will actually become more popular. This might not actually apply to you if you're a fiction writer, if you can actually get some headway. But I'm going to ask you to plan for this because you don't know if something is going to be successful. More realistically, that's what you're going to see. You might write your first novel. You might love it. It's your beautiful novel about foxes in space or whatever. And after a few years, people might just stop being interested. Then you have to decide if you're going to go write something different or write a larger library. Maybe you'll go viral, but I'm saying here to be responsible to yourself and maybe you won't. Renan here is still sewing. You must have great calluses. Yep. And once again, that's why I said you need to limit the order size. Thank you for confessing that you're still doing a sewing project. Limit that kind of stuff. Since I said we're in this for the long tail, I'm going to give you some depressing information about marketing. Okay, first of all, when I mentioned that you would market this yourself on social media, I am going to highly recommend that you set up another profile, another Twitter account, another Facebook account that's separate from your personal ones or whichever one you do for your furry stuff. I'm not here to judge. We're adults here, but um, set it up separately for a couple reasons. Number one, you don't want to get your personal stuff banned because sometimes someone will object to your public stuff, to your public face, and I don't know, terrible stuff happens. People get together and do hate mobs. If your business account gets suspended, you don't want your personal account to get suspended because you could lose a lot of stuff. You're probably using your personal account for banking and setting up, convention events like this one. Secondly, speaking of being responsible, sometimes you want to step away from all this stuff and take a breather. If you used your personal social media as your marketing media, you can't do that. Set up a separate one. Emails and Twitter accounts are pretty easy to set up, and that way you can set it up. I'm extra paranoid where I set up a separate user login ID on my Windows computer. So I'll log out of the personal stuff and log in as the business stuff just to keep those from getting mixed together. Because you've probably seen the jokes of people, accidentally tweeting the After Dark stuff from the main stuff. So, yeah. Okay. Once again, some confessions from folks. You can also go to conventions. Once again, after this long, dark nightmare of the soul is over, we can start going ahead and meeting stuff. As I mentioned, you're going to have to go ahead and sell more copies and send those out to people. So be ready to do that. We're going to talk a little bit about advertising. There's also the option that if you do a crowdfunding, there's the option to go ahead and hire a third party such as BackerKit, which will go ahead and back stuff for you. The third-party people like BackerKit and CrowdOx and some of those guys, they can it can be very daunting to deal with huge spreadsheets. This is mostly for the physical rewards. Like after you do the crowdfunding, you're getting a list of like 8,000 emails. You have to know how to handle that or a bunch of addresses. It's nice to have these guys massage it. Also, places like BackerKit will set up their own. After the event is over, they'll set up their own shopping cart so people can be what's called upsold. So if they bought your thing, they could buy more things. This isn't very useful to you as the first-time publisher because you don't have anything to upsell. With Sanguine Games, we make Iron Claw, and it might be worth, hey, if you liked Iron Claw, should we some Urban Jungle? It might be worth a while to upsell. I'm not a big fan of these third-party guys because they take more money. A place like Kickstarter takes about 10% of your funding. Most of that's to process the credit card fees. So about 6% of that with the credit card fees, and Kickstarter at 4%. BackerKit's a third party. They're going to take another piece. They're going to take at least 15% of your crowdfunding, and they're probably going to take even more than that. And they also have everyone's most hated thing, hidden fees. They will bill you for stuff later that you didn't even know about. Like, for example, if they advertise for you, that's not free. That's not covered by the 15%. They'll bill you for the advertising later. They can eat as much as half of your crowdfunding money. Once again, that's not necessarily bad if you know in advance they're going to eat half your crowdfunding money. And if you're doing a book, maybe you control your costs. But also think about that because that's going to double your crowdfunding budget. If you needed $3,000 to do it solo, you're going to need $5,000, $6,000 to do it with a third party. And you're a first-time publisher. No one's heard of you. Are you going to be able to get $6,000 from a bunch of people who've never heard of you? You're probably going to want to cruise under the radar. You're probably going to want to avoid working with these third parties. Also, we live in the nightmare scheme of 2020, so I want to thank David Melke for showing us this process. Algorithms. Places like Facebook and Twitter have algorithms. Most normal people don't run into those. The people who take pictures of their lunch and share it with 5 other people, that's fine. But after a certain point, like right here, David Melke is posting his cartoons to Facebook. After about 200 people saw his cartoon, it stopped showing up on Facebook feeds, Facebook walls. And so you notice they're shaking him down for money. He says, pay us $10 to get 213 people to see it. We stopped after 212. These numbers are random. We don't know what they are. So you still should advertise, like hype yourself on Facebook and Twitter. But I just want to warn you in advance, you're not crazy. After a certain point, they stop showing you on these. And you'll start getting emails saying, let Twitter help grow your business. You've been algorithmed. You can decide to pay this. I know Malky has decided to pay this if he thinks it's going to be worth it to reach more people. But that basically means you can only expect to reach a few hundred people through social media. Maybe if you went viral, you might meet a few thousand. But once again, you're promoting your own stuff. You're not promoting some Garfield gets thrown out the window cartoon. So we're just being realistic about it. The advantage of crowdfunding is crowdfunding itself is a form of advertising. Kickstarter will hype you. Other people will get hyped when they've backed it. You'll get a few hundred people backing that. And not only does that advertise it by having other people talk about it, and Kickstarter and stuff will all promote it, but it's also money and market research all at the same time. It's really good for you. Okay, so we're going to probably go through this part pretty quickly. This is all the stuff we talked about in little bits, and I showed you the spreadsheet earlier on how to go ahead and set all this up. But your fixed costs are going to pretty much be how much you pay the talent, and if the crowdfunding is going to take 10% off the top. And then we have per unit cost. If you're printing physical books, you have a materials cost where those go out. If you're distributing through different networks, how much does Amazon take? Drive-Thru RPG takes about 33%. Amazon takes anywhere from 25 to 50%, etc. And then we also have to go ahead and put a little thing in there of how much profit you're going to make. Yes, you want profit. You are not a 501c3 or 501c6 certified. You need to make profit. And then we have to guess how many units we're going to sell. That all goes into this big, matrix here. Okay, so once we've gone ahead and, like plug some numbers into our spreadsheet there and figured out, okay, we could probably expect to, if it's going to cost us like $20 each to make 1,000 units, that's $20,000. We then have to figure out how much we'll charge people and then start slicing up this pie to make sure we could pay everybody. Out of $20,000, $2,000 of that's going to go to the crowdfunding. If we budgeted 9% for the talent, that gives us a budget of $1,800 to buy cover art, etc. If we're selling through bookstores take 55%. These are all kinds of details, and they're different for all kinds of different products. So good news. I went ahead and set this up on the Google Sheets, which I believe I shared earlier. So hooray. And then we went ahead and I showed some examples of what some of these look like. Here's a better example, something that's probably more realistic of what you might do. Budgeting for a 48-page graphic novel that you would do as print on demand through Lulu or Lightning Press. If you're doing this like print on demand, okay, there's no retail markup because you're selling directly to the customer. So that part is budgeted down to 0%. But then we have to decide like how much you're going to pay the talent. This assumes that you wrote it and then you hired somebody else to draw it for you, paying them only $150 a page, which by the way is kind of low. But if you're looking at this, notice that this is doable. If you could get $20,000 for your crowdfunding and you had an artist who would work for this, if you had to raise the page rate, we'd have to raise the budget to $25,000 or $30,000. But notice, like, this might actually be possible. We took an abstract idea of I'm going to make a graphic novel and said we're going to be, specific. We're going to be measurable. We're going to make 1,000 of these. We're going to, hire talent to draw our pages for us, and all that kind of stuff. If it was self-published, then once again, you could still charge that much money. Notice the talent budget goes to 0 because it's yours, but we raise the profit because your time is worth money. And of course, this is the one most relevant to you. You live in a golden age where this is still possible. Hopefully, it will still be possible in the next few years where you can just go ahead and make an ebook. Your only issues when you're making an electronic book here is crowdfunding fees and distribution. Tanfer asks, do artists ever work on a share of the author's take instead of upfront? We're going to call that revenue share. Revenue share is a blanket word for whenever you sell something, people take that. Revenue share is a per unit cost. Every time you sell a unit, someone takes that. I have made some licensed products. Like, for example, I've made the Usagi Yojimbo role-playing game. The Usagi Yojimbo role-playing game had both upfront fees and has a revenue share that every time we sell a copy, Stan Sakai, the creator of Usagi Yojimbo, gets a cut. Yes, you can have some folks who will go ahead and get a cut, but this is DIY 101. This is for the self-publishing. No one's heard of you. Almost no artist is going to be willing to, a freelancer is going to be willing to work with you with a revenue share. They don't know who you are. They don't have a working relationship with you, and they probably won't do that. If you're licensing something, like I said earlier, or licensing Usagi Yojimbo, that made a lot more sense. We got access to all of the Usagi stuff, and we pay a fee per sales unit. That was a little more business deal. You as a novelist, you can try to go ahead and schmooze by doing a revenue share. And fortunately, places like drivethroughfiction.com, excellent site, makes it easier to set up revenue shares. But you're the first-time publisher. No one's heard of you. You should plan on paying a fixed fee up front. It's even easier for you anyway, because if you pay the fixed fee up front, you can just go ahead and get on with it. Yeah, Renon's right here because no one's heard of you as a DIY person, which is going to bring us to another point that we're going to get to here in a bit. So, did I pass this up a bit earlier? I think I did. Hold on. I apologize for rewinding here. Okay. I'll make sure this link gets posted again. We have a big issue where we want to make sure that you get contracts. Okay, and let me go ahead and drop this link here. Okay, whenever you hire freelancers or anyone like that, you need to be responsible and get a contract. I have dropped a link in the chat for a sample work for hire contract. Work for hire means that you hire someone else to do something and it's one and done. It's not a revenue share, and you have the rights to do stuff with it. So if you buy like cover art from someone and you do a work for hire contract, that cover art is yours and you can print it on your books, and when you do a reprint, print it again. Standard work for hire contract. Caveat in front of this, I am not a lawyer. The contract that I've included here is one that we have amended through a lot of our business stuff. I've used this with several people, but it has not been legally reviewed. It's just built on sound principles. If you want to hire a lawyer, more power to you. Go ahead and budget for that. But this is an example contract, and also notice that on Google, it's got a lot of commentary in it of certain sections. You should, contracts are important. They're basically a bond between you and the other person. When we talked about stuff being specific, measurable, actionable, responsible, and timetabled, a contract specifies what it is you're asking for, how much of it has to be done, who's doing all the action and the work on it, when it's all due, so it's timetabled, and most importantly, it's responsible where you're saying, look, you're doing this for me so I can go do this with it. Everybody knows what's going on. Don't be afraid of contracts. Sometimes you'll say like, well, this is just a small business deal. We don't really need a contract. Okay, you're better off with a contract. Any, artist is going to be willing to work with a contract. I have used this contract with our artists and writers and amendments. This contract also, if you read it, has a couple notes in it. Most importantly, an indemnity clause. One problem you can run into when you hire artists off of the internet, like on Fiverr.com or whatever, they'll just grab stuff off of the internet and send it to you and tell you it's theirs. And you don't want to have to deal with art swipes because it can kill your sales. You don't want to print 1,000 copies of a book and then later have someone show up and say, hey, they swiped my artwork for the cover. No, you don't want that. You get a contract that specifies who did what. The contract I also put in here does talk about revenue shares. If you decide to do a revenue share, it should have specific dates of when the revenue is of when that's paid out. Yeah, Genora saying legally a handshake and verbal contract is legally binding. Get a written contract. The contract thing we included there is complex enough that it deals with your issues, but simple enough that you can understand it. And once again, you're also doing a Kickstarter thing. If you're going to do a crowdfunding thing, that's a contract between you and all the people that you're going to go ahead and get this to show up. So let's see. Once again, if you're crowdfunding or doing something like that, you want to deliver on it. Don't think just because you got the money that you can go ahead and sit pretty. I believe in you. A couple other things, assure your quality. If you are an author, I would recommend that if you're doing a crowdfunding to budget a little extra for editorial services and hire a professional editor. Don't just get your friends to read it. They're going to miss things. I'm not expecting your book to be perfect, but a good editor can go ahead and find some. We had some very good panels on how the editing process is your friend. This isn't really mandatory, but I would recommend that you get a hold of a lawyer's business card. You don't actually have to pay the lawyer, and it doesn't even have to be the right kind of lawyer. Just get that. If any rando shows up out of the blue and says, "Hey, you stole my idea of writing about foxes in space that fly spaceships," because for some reason, I don't know, you'll get you might get a weirdo who shows up and claims that you stole their book. If somebody does show up like that, you say, "Here's my lawyer." You email them back or message them back saying, "Here's the contact information for a lawyer," and then you block that person and never talk to them again. If someone threatens you with legal action, even jokingly, this doesn't happen as much as it used to, but you just do that. That gets rid of them because as soon as you told them, "This is my lawyer," and you block them, you did your due diligence. If they actually call the lawyer, which they're not going to do, but if they actually call the lawyer would then call you and said, "Yeah, apparently I represent you now," and hash it out. But that doesn't really happen. I'm just recommending just have that as a security blanket on hold. This doesn't really happen, but at least whatever you do, if someone does threaten you and say you plagiarized, don't get in a Twitter fight. Don't get in a fight on the internet. Take them seriously and just say, "Look, here's my lawyer," and block them. And you're done. It's 2020. You got to take this stuff seriously. You don't want them coming back later with DMCAs or whatever and that kind of stuff. Do your due diligence and don't feed them. Don't feed trolls. Once again, as I mentioned, treat everyone right, but hedge your bets. In other words, contracts are good. Make sure you get everybody paid. Make sure you're nice to everyone. But always, when in doubt, make sure you're asking for slightly more money than you need just in case something goes wrong. I know this is a big thing to say in 2020 about having an emergency fund or a credit card, but that's another reason to ask for a little extra money. Something might go wrong. I've had a couple things go wrong. What could possibly go wrong this year? It's just, country's on fire, and we've got a plague epidemic, and couldn't do any conventions to raise any money or stumping things. Ask for a little bit extra because things will go wrong. Okay, so we've got a couple extra links in here to share. I'm not going to share the Amazon link because I think you guys can find that. But some other random links I want to share. This is one of my favorites. This is the E-Myth. They sell excellent books, but the E-Myth is about the entrepreneur myth, which was the idea was the easy part. When you're self-publishing, you will have to wear a bunch of hats. You have to be the marketer. You have to be the technician to make the book possible. You have to be the boss to make sure stuff gets done and that kind of stuff. That can be very draining. You can lose a lot of spoons very quickly. So, but the E-Myth is a good book to read to get your morale back up. Go ahead and read that. They say, look, deep breaths. We can break all this down into smart little goals. They have free stuff on their webpage, and they also sell books and they sell seminars. I have the books and the free stuff on the website, so I recommend that. This is Ingram, which does Lightning Source. They print books. And here is Lulu. They also print books for you. So if you want to do small print runs or large print runs, these guys are very handy. I know it says one bookshelf there, but apparently one bookshelf is closed. Let's go ahead and do a link to Drive Through Fiction. Drive Through Fiction is run by some role-playing game guys, but they sell Drive Through RPG, which we've worked with, but they also sell like comic books and fiction books. They're very good. They can also help set you up with automatic revenue share, so you and a bunch of other people can do a project and then share the revenue and be selling it immediately with no setup fees. They're very nice, and after you sell a couple thousand copies, they get even nicer. So highly recommend them, and they've got a Discord server and stuff. Very nice if you're doing comic books, especially. Print Ninja guys are very nice. They take some very technical issues and break them down into physical stuff. So if you have to print stuff with a lot of artwork in it, Print Ninja is very friendly to that. I mostly work in the hobby and games industry. So if you wanted to make a mock-up of what a board game might look like, GameCrafter will let you sell games, but they're print on demand, so they're going to have expensive parts that aren't very good for like $40 to $60. But you can use them to prototype the game, get physical copies of it, see what it looks like, play it with other people and network. So they're very nice about that. And then there's a humor article I like to read. This is The 10 Wings. God bless Kimra still being up there. This is a little article that says some humorous stuff on gaming. So that kind of stuff. So a lot of this was discussed, is still timely on our website. So this is when we did the presentation. Print Ninja would definitely do coloring books. I believe they have in the past. They have a variety of printing options. They'll even do cookbooks with spiral binding. Print Ninja have been great. You can write to them, ask them lots of questions. I want to go ahead and link to some other things here. So I don't believe Maggie Hogarth was one of the presenters here, but she's written some books on her experience on publishing her own fiction. So there's a link to that one right there. In case any of you want to talk about what intellectual property means, Boozy Barrister, who you may know as Boozy Badger, has a nice article on how to go ahead and do that. And I understand that there's a bunch of guys who get together and help people write stuff, especially if it's furry fiction stuff. So I don't know if anyone's heard of this Furry Writers Guild, but apparently they have a lot of resources to help people. And if you have to go ahead and hype yourself, here is a link to Gama Sutra's article, How to Write a Press Release, which is if you have to tell people what your product is, or you want to tweet about it or do a Facebook post, this shows you, once again, you want to tell people, you want to get in, get out. You want to give them the big details and get out. And this is a nice read for that. And if you're not sick of my face yet, back in 2018, I was lucky enough to speak with Maggie Hogarth on a panel that was specifically about writing. And this one, she'll talk a lot more about her book. So this is a compliment to the links. This is a recording from Anthrocon 2018 about all that kind of stuff. So let's see, we did that. And I think I dropped the work for hire contract, but let's drop it again. Yay! Work for our contract, and that's pretty much the whole thing. Normally I would go into a lot more details about the production, on the merchandising and selling of stuff, but this is a fiction workshop, so mostly we talked about how to go ahead and get your book set up, and I've got you a lot of other links. So this is my presentation where I tell you, click on a bunch of other links and see what other people have said. But we've got a few more minutes before closing ceremonies. So thanks everybody for showing up for this incredibly late panel. I know it's been a long day and that sort of thing. And if you have any questions, I know there's a bit of a delay. So any questions I can answer before we're out here? I've been doing a couple panels today, so as you can see, my voice is starting to give out, so sorry about that. Oh, thanks. I'm going to pronounce that Greg. Yeah. So we've been doing this for a while. I'm a veteran of several of these self-publishing things for many years, and I heard a lot of misinformation going around. That's why I wanted to correct some of that. And some people making the same mistakes, like, poor Rich Berlew having to do all those autographs, and poor Rhiannon here having to sew all those dolls. If only they had known, just cap it at 100. So, no more questions. You can ask me anything. Do you guys see the little bacteria that's around me too? Oh my god, my screen's infected. It wasn't too spooky having the underlighting, was it? My overhead light's a little weak, so I have this under light here from the desk. No, you're all easy like Sunday morning. Well, thanks for going ahead and hearing me out. Once again, I work for Sanguine Games. We publish a bunch of fiction books like Scars, Black Iron, Dream Carver, and new this year was Book of Legends. We work with Tempeo Kun, name you may have heard of, and a bunch of other people. So we're excited to be doing fiction stuff. We also do comic books. And if there's any time left over, we do role playing games. I'm often over on, Sanguine Games. And also, when there's time, I often guest on Ractus's channel, where we've been doing a couple games. I was out for a while, but I'll be coming back pretty soon. So you can go ahead and check all that out. And it was great sharing time with you. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out before the next panel shows up. Unless anyone has more questions. And listen, keep us informed. Let us know what you're up to because, I think it's always exciting that, we live in this time period where almost anyone can make anything and find their own market. No one may have heard of you, and I know I say all these pessimistic things, but on the other hand, right now you have a window now more than ever to make your voice be heard and to make the kind of art you want to see in this world.